Welcome to the Walking America podcast. Today we're speaking with Derek. We had reached out to the town of Assumption to find camping, and later that day the mayor of the town, Derek, along with his alderman, took us out for dinner, where we were able to spend some time getting to know one another. Today we talk about the responsibilities of the mayor, politics in today's world, and finding contentment within our current institutions. I'm joined by my wife Paige, and I'm your host. Welcome to the podcast, Derek.
Well, thank you. You're the first person I've ever done a podcast with.
Well, neat. I'm happy to be the first one. You're not just a mayor, you have another job which is political in nature. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I work for the Illinois State Senate for the Office of the Secretary of the Senate, and I do bill status. So what I do is that I track all of the legislation that runs through the Senate.
What does that mean exactly, tracking all of the legislation that runs through the Senate? How does that manifest for you?
So how it just, not just for me, but for like the whole operations of the Senate, it manifests into basically creating our journal, creating our daily calendar, and also maintaining our website. So anytime like a bill goes for when a bill is introduced, it is read into the record first reading, and then that is tracked then into whether amendments have been filed. With that, you put it onto the second reading of the bill, because in Illinois, a bill has to be read 3 times. That's in our state constitution. So basically, what I'm doing is tracking the legislation to make sure that it meets all of the legal requirements, that it has all of the necessary amendments, and that also once it is then sent to the governor for signature, everything is all in line for it to become a public act.
I see. Is this something that is just for the government's own purposes, or is it something that you're making available to the public?
No, it's available to the public. It is available to the public. Anybody can go on, track any bill that they see. The website is www.ilga.gov. You can track, type in like Senate Bill 1, and it'll give you the history of the bill, show you where it's all at. I'm the one that had inputted all of that information in there. But no, it's for the public. It's for the public means.
Well, that must mean that you have quite the eagle's eye on all of the goings on of the government out down there.
Yeah, I mean, it does take, you got to have a little bit of joy for it, because it can be a little overwhelming, especially when there's times. So in the Senate itself, they introduce about 2,800 bills a year. Now, out of that, only about 500 become law, but it is still about, transparency, of course, but then also making sure that you're putting everything right to where it's supposed to be. Things that get assigned to committee can. I mean, there's been times that, oh, hey, we're going to send this bill to a committee. Well, we can't, because it's still in what's called the assignments committee. It still needs to be kicked out in order for it to go. So there's still a lot of things that even staff need to follow. And so you do have to have an eagle eye to kind of catch it, but then also kind of know what's going on too.
That's pretty interesting. And really, I think part of what I mean when I say an eagle's eye over it is you're really looking at all of the ways that the government is enacting policy over people. You know exactly what's happening. That's like an interesting position to be in, because, whenever I go to try to read some law on something that I'm trying to find out, just because we're walking across the country and we have to pay attention to some of those things, it can be difficult to find, and there's a lot to sift through. Do you find it to be an arduous task at times, or is it?
Yeah, I do. There is a lot of legislation. I try not to find the things that I want to see, because when I do the job in the Senate, it's bipartisan, but then also you cannot throw in your 2 cents, because I'm essentially doing the job for the people. And, there's some things that it's like, might come up that affect municipalities that I don't necessarily really agree with. But it still has to let it run this process. The senator or the member of the House of Representatives that's introduced this bill, they've done it for their cause. So I let it just kind of run its system, run its course, and kind of deal with the consequences there later, or if there is any. I mean, really, there's been a lot of good things that's been passed that hasn't been detrimental to municipalities or anything. But some things I try to track and just kind of see like where it's going to go. But then there's others that it's like there's just so much there. It's like, okay, it's going to boggle my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool though.
Well, thanks. And there's one of me in every state, so that's another thing. Somebody, and I have gone to other states to see my counterpart, to see how they do things. Every place has been different, of course, so it's always been interesting to learn it.
Yeah, I can't believe that they only have one person doing that job. It seems like such a tremendous task.
You're right. I mean, we do have backups. I mean, I'm also a backup for somebody that wants to do the journal or handle our committee. So in case there is a time that I'm gone, but you've got to have a joy for government, in my opinion, in order to hold a job like this. And there's been people that's worked in the Senate, and it's like they've lasted 1 year, and it's like, no, this is not for me. I want to go into the private sector or go to another government agency and do something. So now I've done it for 19 years, and I can really count on one hand how many people are still there when I first started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a good chunk of time. So
it is. I started in January of 2004. So.
And you could retire with this job.
I could, yes. And I think that's kind of my goal. I've settled in long enough, and it is a political job, but it's not like a political like in nature. If I was to work for the governor, then you're worrying about every election cycle. Oh, am I going to be out of a job if the governor loses? Things of that nature. Because I've seen friends in that position. Yeah, they make great money, but then a new governor comes in. They're out the door. So I really don't want that. So once I get someplace, I like to get comfortable.
Yeah, understandable. I can't even imagine worrying about each election cycle.
Yeah,
all of this that I had built was for nothing.
Yeah, you're right. And some people, I mean, I know people that's done great things, but they get a different party in. And we had this when it was Governor Quinn that went to Governor Rauner. And, all those Democrats that was in office under Quinn lost their job. Same thing under Rauner. We had a lot of people working for the Republican administration then when Governor Pritzker came in, got rid of all those. And so it's that, I mean, I get it. I see how it works. Sometimes I don't feel it's always a good thing because you do lose a lot of institutional knowledge, even if it is for 4 years, and a lot of projects that I feel that are good could be then put onto the wayside. And it's like that in the federal government. I can tell you a situation we were working with the Trump administration to get things for our water treatment plant. And the person got fired when President Biden came in. And it took about over a year to get that person hired to approve appropriations. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a mess. And it's like, and we talked to the federal EPA and they're like, hey, it's on a desk, but the person to actually approve it hasn't been hired. So, wow. Yeah.
Could you see a more efficient solution to that problem that wouldn't necessarily mean one person in authority indefinitely, or that could?
So, when it's politics, everybody takes things personal. My solution is that I don't think a politician should come in and fire everybody day one. It's like that across the board. And then there's also people that get mad. We saw this with when President Trump was in, get mad and quit. Well, projects are still going. Government does not essentially stop just because a certain person won or lost an election. So what I feel is that you take the personal role out of it. Yeah, they may be a director or some sort of a assistant director, even keep them in until you actually have that person that you want into that position and work with that other party so that things don't get lost, because I think that happens too much, is that people leave on day one of a new administration, and then, like I said, things fall through the cracks. I mean, there's been times, you hear about, well, I can't get this direct in Illinois. At least directors can come in immediately on day one, and they don't have to be actually confirmed until a year later. And the federal government's a little bit different. They got to be confirmed before they get actually kind of started into that role, and I think that's where the problems lie. So maybe
Like the
kind of change it up in some way, shape, or form. Take the personalities and the personal feelings out of it. But it's politics. It's been like this since day one. Since Washington, basically.
well, speaking of transitions of power and election cycles, what are your primary responsibilities as a mayor?
So basically, my primary responsibilities. So we have what's called an automatic form of government. So I'm not a strong mayor or anything. The council basically sets up the roles for the mayor. So my goal, what I am is the CEO of the city. I make sure that the day-to-day operations are rolling, making sure that our potholes are getting filled, our streets are being cleaned, our water is safe to drink. We're getting police protection, that the day-to-day operations of the city is maneuvering. Now, when it comes to policies, I can't just up and create like an ordinance or anything. That has to be ran through the city council. So I do that, it runs through it, and then if they approve it by a majority vote, then it becomes an ordinance or even a new policy of some sorts. So that's basically is my role as mayor, just to make sure that the day-to-day operations of the city is being fulfilled.
You said you're not like a strong mayor. Are there other types of mayors that have more reaching authority?
There is. So if you like the mayor of Chicago, for instance, is what's considered a strong mayor. If you're a mayor of a non-home rule community, you have a lot more saying, you have a lot more pull. So like, for instance, like you want to take like the mayor of Springfield, Misty Buscher, like, for instance, their spending authority is, like, I don't know, like $100,000. They can just do $100,000 worth of stuff and no questions asked by their board. Here in Assumption, for instance, I only have like $1,000 authority. So anything less than that, no problem. Anything higher than that, I've got to run through the board. We've got to, have it all be approved. So it's things like that. It takes longer because there may be something that happens at the beginning of the month after a city council meeting that may need to be addressed. And I was like, well, we got to wait until the next month in order for it to be approved. That's where it gets to. And for one, it's bad because it's a smaller town, so that's why they kind of have it set up like that with non-home rule and home rule communities. So it's good, but then it's also can be bad, in my opinion, because it does delay some things.
Hmm. Would you say that your aims as mayor differ as a Democrat? Like, would a conservative mayor play his role differently in your shoes?
Yes. Well, I don't think it's just so much of a Democrat Republican, because I've worked for both, honestly. Quite honestly, I think it's how one wants to see it. Now, granted, as a Democrat, I am definitely in the minority. I mean, I'm in the middle of a Republican territory, prolifically a Trump area. But I don't focus on the Trumpism or the Republican part. I look at what's more of like the what they call the kitchen table issues. Infrastructure, housing, economic development, all those things right there that can improve one's ability, that improves the community that I live in. That's what basically my focus is on. I want to create more housing so that we can increase our population. I want to make sure that we get rid of all of our lead service lines that's in there so that everybody has safe drinking water. I want to make sure that our roads that we're doing, with the infrastructure projects that we have are one of the best. So, and with economic development, that we are trying to maintain our current businesses that we have and also trying to bring in new businesses. Just like at DJs, I worked with them through TIF to get them to, into the building that they're in. So I don't look at it too much as a Democrat or Republican. I look at it more as this is kind of what I feel for the community, and I think everybody I think everybody fulfills that. Now, how you get there, some people don't like it that I spend TIF money for things like that. I think that's more of just a philosophical way on doing, especially with our housing. But once we get the people here, we start get houses built, and we start seeing that revenue off of that. I think that a lot of people will really be happy with it.
You said TIF money. Is that an acronym for something?
Yeah, it's a tax increment financing is what it stands for. So what we have is a TIF district. And kind of how it works, a little bit in a nutshell, is we'll use the subdivision that we're trying to get in. So right now, the land is already based at a certain tax rate. So let's just say the taxes on it's $1,000, okay? Well, so the city will then, we have already annexed that land into the city. We've increased our TIF district to incorporate those lands. So let's say somebody then goes on and builds a house onto that $1,000 piece of property that's paid taxes. So let's say then it bumps the tax base to $4,500. That $3,500 goes into our TIF fund because you're already paying $1,000 on the thousand, but that $3,500, because it's increased that much by you putting a house on it, goes into a special TIF fund that we can use for economic development purposes. So if we do want to have a business come in, create more housing, things like that, that's what we use that money for.
Oh, okay. It's kind of like a little savings account for economic development that you're getting from this surplus of funds that you've created elsewhere.
That's exactly right. And in Illinois, it's a 23-year project. So we started this in 2017. So we have our TIF projects until 2040. And then once 2040 arrives, we can then create a new TIF district, get rid of it, or ask or basically create another one for another 23 years.
Okay. What do you find is your most challenging duty as mayor?
Probably one of my most challenging is I find is, I wear some of my feelings on my sleeve, is trying to please everybody. I know that I can't, but I don't like confrontation at all. So I do try to find that happy medium. And it does make it a little bit difficult because some points I just can't, if it's like somebody that's constantly complaining about a dog or constantly complaining about a flooded street, there's just some things that, we just can't do, or we just don't have the money. One situation is when if we get over an inch of rain, the street floods, and then therefore it floods these people's yard. I mean, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix it by putting in storm sewers. And it's been like that since the beginning, since assumption, that street was created. Situations when you got barking dogs and, dogs bark. I get it. People want to be quiet at night. You can talk to the owners, but right to have their dog. As long as it's not a nuisance, we can't really do much. But that's kind of what I find is trying to please everybody. And sometimes it does stress on me. It's like, oh, why am I even doing this? These people complain about everything, or, they need to be spoon fed. But all in all, I love it. But it does have its days.
Of course. Please everybody.
Yeah, that night we were there with you at Assumption Fest. It seemed like there were several people vying for your attention, trying to, get a word into your ears or so.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of is that a regular thing when you're just about town?
Yeah, it is. And some of that is just by me personally, how I am. I mean, I want to be accessible. I don't want it to where I want to be one of these people that, you don't talk to me on the streets, only reach me during business hours. I want to be accessible. I mean, I enjoy everybody. And I feel that that's when you work for the people, that's how you should be. So everybody knows that just from over the 10 years of my time being here. And especially when I got on the council, it's like, come up to me any time and talk to me. I've had people come to my house and talk to me. So, and I don't mind it. I mean, as long as they're nice, and understanding, in which honestly everybody really is, then I don't mind it at all. But that's just kind of how I am as a person.
That's really cool.
You seemed very gracious while we were there.
Oh, thank you.
Do you have other aims beyond mayor? Is there anything that you're working toward? Do you have the opportunity to go round 2 for mayor?
I do have the opportunity. My term is up in May of 25. And so basically, I'll have about a year to decide on if I want to run or not. I have thought of going up for higher office. I thought of maybe, going for Senate. But at the same time, I'm happy with where I'm at. Probably, I figure maybe if I retire, if I don't end up running for another office, I'll stay as mayor, but then also maybe do something more on the state level for municipalities. I feel like that's my niche. One thing I love doing is going to other towns and seeing what they do and trying to bring those ideas back. So I even kind of thought of maybe like lobbying for something for municipalities to see about, and just taking ideas across the state. But right now, I think we're just going to stay as mayor, probably do another term, but I've got a year to decide about that.
What would you ideally do if you had no limitations on what you could do?
Probably one thing I would like to look into, like, economic development. Every community has a great resource, and what I would like to do is like go in and say, hey, if you have problems like getting like this type of a business in, or your downtown is struggling, one thing that because I see that a lot, work with a community to form like a community foundation board, a 501c3, and create it to where they're the ones that kind of goes and tries to work with another business to come in, or try to get this little market set up, a little restaurant set up, and just kind of build from there. That's kind of one thing that I would like to see, because for one, it's worked here in Assumption. We've done it. And so it can be done. I know Mowequa has kind of started, but they just don't have the people to do it. But I feel that if you do it like in a little micro segment, kind of even create it as like a little petri dish to get something started, then it will eventually grow.
So what would your job title actually be if you were to do something like that?
I don't really know. I don't, probably something with like economic developer. I probably something like that. I mean, and it kind of depends. I mean, if I've thought about, maybe, if something like this were to come up, to take it with the county level. If you do it through like a nonprofit, then, I don't know. I would just say more economic developer.
It seems like you have a passion for politics. What draws you to it?
Well, so I've kind of grew up in politics. My mom was an elected official over at the county level. So I've always grown up with it. I've always enjoyed it. My grandparents were in politics, whether it be on the township or on the county level. Nobody in my family was ever at the state level, but I've always kind of just enjoyed it. I liked going up to the courthouse and watching the votes come in. I liked listening to both sides of an argument. I've just kind of just been drawn because I just grew up around it. And then I saw the benefits of it, of helping people too. Whether it be, like you're helping somebody like at the township level, helping them to get money so that they could get food through their general assistance programs. And then my mom was doing, she was the county treasurer, seeing it when she was helping people with their taxes, helping them to get discounts, like through senior exemptions, things to that nature.
I definitely marry well with that comment that you had about liking to hear both sides of an argument.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that quite a lot myself. I don't know what people necessarily study in college. Did you go through any logic courses, like logical argumentation or anything like that, learning about?
No, the closest thing I went through was philosophy. And I don't know, I had a love-hate for it because, it was, you couldn't really bring in like a God aspect into it. So that kind of made some difficult decisions, that kind of made things difficult there. But that was probably about the closest, was when I took philosophy.
Yeah. Well, those original early Western philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, they
Hmm.
kind of set the groundwork for logical argumentation. I think it
You're right.
was Aristotle. He was the founder of the syllogism, I
I think
believe.
so. Yes.
Yeah. And I find all that stuff really fascinating. It's
Hmm.
cool to watch it play out and see people try to, win others
Hmm.
over between, emotional appeals and demagoguery, or watching reason itself just absolutely fail to a crowd. It's pretty interesting.
Exactly. But also I'll tell you too, a lot of that I think is kind of gone now because most people it's like it's my opinion or I'm right, you're wrong. There's no way you're going to convince me. I mean, there's always an argument. There's always two sides to every story. Of course, there's always two sides to every debate as well. But I think that there's too much. Nobody wants to kind of see another avenue. It's like you're going to do it this way and this way only, and it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's peculiar to me because it seems to me that if we're shown to be wrong, that's really only something in our favor still, because it means now we're closer to the truth and we can take on that greater accuracy for ourselves. And otherwise, if we are in fact right, we have the opportunity to challenge our assumptions and
Mhm.
make sure that our beliefs are firmly grounded.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I don't know if it's true on an individual level. It would be interesting to see some data. But the consensus, especially in walking, yeah, the consensus in walking across the country seems to be that the two parties are growing increasingly polarized.
Yes, definitely.
What do you see as the root problem in that?
So I think the root problem, to be quite honest with you, I think it kind of started with Donald Trump. When he came in, okay, so I mean, I feel everybody always had respect for politicians. I mean, it was the institution, it's respect for the office. I think when Trump came in and he started saying the things that he did, whether they were bashing women, bashing minorities, I think that kind of, for one, it fueled a lot of people that's like, yes, yes, he's saying things that I've always been in the closet about, and he's saying things that's out in the open. So I agree with this man. And I think that is kind of where it had really kind of began. I mean, that's where I'm kind of seeing this giant polarization, because you kind of have some of the where the people struggle the most is the independents, because they're the ones that's trying, and I consider myself to be kind of more of an independent minded, because I see, like I said, both sides. But when you're trying to pull both forces together, like even in a room, I mean, I know people that won't go to a party because they're like, well, he's got a dang, F Biden a flag in the front room. And it's kind of like, okay, I don't like it, but I don't care. Another instance where there was a lady, okay, so she had, Trump 2024 and was working at a gas station here. I know one of my friends went and complained to corporate that she was driving, and she was working at Casey's. I don't care. I don't care about that. She's doing her job. It's a freedom of expression, it's a freedom of speech. But I think with things like that, it's been so polarization. And then if you was to even ask them, like, why do you have this type of a flag? Why do you not like Biden? The answer is, oh, they make fun of his age. He can't remember anything. It's never on policy. It's not. And it's the same with Trump. You try to. I will admit Trump did do some good things. You talk about the tax decrease that he did. Nobody talks about that. Not some of my friends that, hey, our income taxes did get lower, but they don't. They talk about, oh, well, you got to know how, what he did with what he did with the minority, how he was with the stuff, the skinheads in Virginia. They don't. And it's kind of like, those things are important, but then we've moved on from some of that. We're not, people are still wanting to fight the Civil War. We've moved on from it. So, but and COVID made things worse, in my opinion. People forget, here's the thing with inflation. Inflation started under Trump. When he, and I knew hey, I loved getting my stimulus check. Don't get me wrong, but I knew the bill's going to come due at some point. And then with the bills that he was signing and the rate of, and with, like I said, we had to pay for it. When there was a $1 trillion, $2 trillion bill that he had signed, we knew right then it was going to play out, and we're going to have to pay for it. But it wasn't Trump's fault. You go and talk to some people. No, it's the Democrats. It's Bidenomics. No. So,
how do you see Trump? Like, is he charlatan? Is he malicious? Is he just kind of out of his depth?
I think he's malicious, and I think he's a little bit out of his step. I wouldn't want to see him president, but it's at the same time, I'm not gonna, lock myself in my room and cry for 4 years. I mean, I will tell you, I will vividly remember election night in 2016 when Hillary had lost. I mean, I went to bed and I thought, Hillary be able to pull it out. I can't remember if it was Ohio, a couple of states, I think will end up making it happen. But when I woke up and it's like, oh my gosh. And, Trump had won, and I worked with Republicans, and I was like, I just was waiting for them to be like gloating. I got to tell you, it was like a funeral. Like nobody said anything at work. It's like very quiet because I think even they were shocked by it. I think one thing I did like with Trump is that I liked his sternness with Iran, because I think that there were some points that I think on foreign policy, I think Trump was good on. I'll even kind of say, I don't want him to think that he's playing with dictators, but there was, I was in California at the time when people over there were scared that North Korea was going to shoot something over. And, and North Korea is one of those countries you just don't know what's going to be going on. But when Trump did make that visit and talk to him, I was kind of pleased with it, I hate to say, because it did kind of like, okay, this is a guy, it's almost like a bully in school. It's kind of like, you're getting picked on nonstop, and then you got one of your friends that goes over and kind of, hey, quit knocking it off, stop messing with Derek, he's all right. I kind of felt that we got that a little bit out of Trump with it, but that was the only thing. I think some things on foreign policy he was good on.
Well, I gotta say, I appreciate your balanced view. That
yeah,
giving credit here, but you have reservations there. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
There does seem to be an uptick in black and white thinking, kind of all or nothing, and nothing's ever that simple. There's nuance in every area of life.
Yes.
If it's more just that's the sort of stuff that's showcased, because as we walk across the country and we get to know so many different people, we get into these discussions not having our own stake on either side, and people seem to be a lot more nuanced and not as one side or the other for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of easy to perceive, though it would be probably the wrong perception, a lack of nuance, especially when you're just seeing, we've seen entire walls covered in, I don't even know where you get a flag or a sheet this big where Trump, he's got the LNG in his hands and a bandana on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And an F Biden flag or an F Trump flag, and
not a lot of F Trump flags.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of those.
It's
yeah, we
like,
yeah.
So we were taken out by both you and the alderman, who was conservative, I'm assuming Republican.
He is, yes.
But you two seem to get along fine. How do you think friends and family of opposing political views should navigate conversations with one another?
Quite honestly, and it's kind of like this with my own family. I mean, on my mom's side, they're conservative Republicans, and then on my dad's side, they're more of the liberal Democrats. For one, we talk about it, but then we don't really get too deep into it. It will be like for instance, if we're over at somebody's house and they'll say, well, did you see what Trump did today? And we're like, oh yeah, he did that. And then just kind of, end it. The thing with me and like with because I have some other aldermen that's Democrat and some other aldermen that's Republican. is that you just kind of maybe take like the politics out of it. Um, I mean, if Trump was president and he came to Assumption, I would definitely greet him. I mean, I'm not going to turn my back to him. But I think it's like I said, it goes back to just my personality. I mean, I let them be respectful of who they want, but at the same time, I'm not going to let them sit at a council table and wear their Trump 2024, apparel and sit there and go on a rant about, Joe Biden or anything like that. I don't allow that because it's like, we're here for the people of Assumption. You can do that on your other time, but when we're here for everybody, and we've got both sides of people's views that we're representing. So I kind of just leave it at that. And I don't really have too many things of people like posting weird things like on Facebook about, the political rants or anything. Gary kind of will on news sites, but and the other thing that it's for one, sometimes it's funny. I mean, I will admit it's like he'll post something about, President Biden. It's like, all right, that was a little bit funny, but he he if somebody doesn't like it and they want to run against him, more power to him, but no, nobody has, and he just ends it there.
Do you think that we should be working to, I don't know if this language is too strong, working to win the war of ideas with one another? Is it something that should be discussed for the sake of humanity, and or is it really better to just kind of let everyone solve this on their own and kind of deliver their vote is cast?
I think just kind of let everybody solve it on their own, to be quite honest with you, because some people will never understand. I mean, like, I'll use the gender neutral bathrooms. I mean, my gosh, I mean, the number of times, if you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go to the bathroom. Who cares whether it's in the men's or the women's? But you have some people that is, they are going to die on their last sword to make sure that a man cannot use the same bathroom as a woman. And I just think that some of that stuff is just ludicrous. So you'll never win arguments on that. So I would say just let people pick their own decisions and go with them. I mean, some of them are nuts. I also think too, a lot of this, it needs to go back into the schools. I mean, I was taught civics and government by a former city council member in Shelbyville, and I feel that a lot of that is not done now. I bet you if you ask some high school kids, how many counties does Illinois have, that they wouldn't know. So I think some of it goes back to be taught in college, because back in high school, because what's going to happen is that when they go to college, and I think this is where a lot of families get divided. They, especially growing up in a small town, if they go to a college in Chicago, St. Louis, then they get to experience other cultures. And then they're like, oh, hey, I've been sheltered all this life, and here I am seeing, some, group of African Americans for the first time, gays, transsexuals, or transgenders. So, when they start seeing that, then it kind of opens up their eyes. It's like, hey, there's more than just what we have in a little podunk town of Assumption.
Where do you see humanity? Is it business as usual with some hyperbole thrown in? Are we on the brink of some kind of societal collapse? Is climate change going to destroy us all? What is the state of the world right now?
That's a tough one. Quite honestly, I think we're on the brink of humanity falling apart, to be honest with you. I still think there's hope by, some means, because sometimes I think that just the bad news is what gets out there, but there's also a lot of good news being done. The climate change issue, and this is where all governments, we have to understand what climate change is going on. And I can remember reading a book when I was like a little kid, talking about climate change and talking about, possibility that, living in Illinois, your climate's going to be more like Florida. And, at that time, you're like, oh, yeah, we're going to be like Florida, go to the beach or something. But I think for one, I think we still have our head in the sand. There is some things that I know that we are changing we're changing our lifestyles on. But also, I think we might be just a little. I think we're a little too late to correct the problem, but I think now what we need to be doing is to adapt with the problem that we now have of global warming. And I think with that, I think our attitudes are just going to have to change. If we're going to have more hotter weather, people's going to be more crankier. People's cranky now. So, but
Sure.
How would you see adaptation distinguished from correction? How how would that result? I mean, are we building larger air conditioners or moving to different parts of the United States? Would you say that?
well, for one, I mean, we're finding more people's moving to places like Florida, Alabama, Louisiana than any time we ever have. I think that's going to be the problem areas because I think we're going to have more severe storms. And then also at the same time, we're going to have more severe storms here in the Midwest. So I think how we do kind of change on that, of course, is getting rid of the fossil fuels. We're still going to need some sort of fossil fuel for probably the rest of our lives, given that we also we like to have our plastic drinks, our plastic water bottles. I know you can make things out of that, out of recycling, but I don't think we're there yet to be 100% oil free and plastic free. So I see with like our electric vehicles, I see probably a little bit more wind and solar. I know nuclear is safe, but I think more of wind and solar is going to be the thing. But one thing I would like to see is more of it used on the in the oceans, like the also up in the Great Lakes, having it done there. But I think that that's going to probably be the way. And then when I say that, our governments have to also adapt because when you want 1 million electric vehicles on the road, we have to put in the charging stations. Private entity, I mean, can do it. I mean, there's a place over in Springfield that's put in a bunch of charging stations as a grocery store, and they're putting them in their chains. So that's a good thing. But then at the same time, there's a lot of communities that's like we just don't want them. They're too costly. We don't want to manage them. But I think that's the way it's going. But yes, it's going to make our world cleaner, but I think we're already here. We're going to start having more and more days of 100 degrees. I don't really look for us to maybe have more snowstorms. I think we're going to have more tornadoes, more severe thunderstorms, and it's going to be all year. I mean, I would probably expect at some point on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, we will have a tornado warning. So I think that's kind of where we're going.
That would just be absolutely odd, but I could see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh, what is the number one thing? Obviously, there are a lot of existential problems the government needs to deal with, but what is the number one thing federal and local government could do to bring contentment to its citizens?
Well, I think one thing is for the local, we'll start there, is definitely understand the needs of what people want. And I get it, you can go block by block, house to house and see what their needs are, but you can't fix every one of them, but you can get a consensus of what is needed. And I think I feel that everybody deserves a job. I think everybody deserves to, live their, have their freedoms. So I think if we are able to provide them with that to make sure that, hey, you've got safe drinking water, you've got a job, you've got, your rights as a person here, no matter what, you can still own, Second Amendment right, you can still have your guns. And then also at the same time, you have a right to be with a man or a woman. So I think as long as we have that, that's fine. Less intrusion by the local governments. At the federal level, I'm going to kind of have to say probably more so of the same, but it's going to take more of a war effort to get there because then you're just dealing with so many different personalities. But you can start it at the local level, and at the federal level, I think the best thing is just to know what the people's needs are, and that is, make sure that everybody, should have a job that has one, and go from there. It's kind of tough question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I would just find the most difficult ones I could conjure up today.
Yeah, well, that one was difficult, So,
Keep you on your toes.
uh-huh.
There's this tightrope that has to be walked when considering the safety of a population versus the individual's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Should safety or freedom be weighted more heavily when legislating or making policy?
I'm gonna have to go with safety on that, and the reason being is because no matter what the issue, so let's say you're debating something on, we'll start with like the assault weapons. I feel you have your right to own a gun, but you don't have the right to own an assault rifle. An AR-15, you don't need it. So I feel that needs to be thought of, because there is people out there that is mentally unstable that does not deserve to have a gun. And then also at the same time, also when you do debate legislation, whether at the local level or at the federal level, state level, you also need to think of safety for the minorities. You also need to think of it for, like I said, transgender, gays, things like that, to make sure that they are safe in any decision. Because no matter what, whether you're debating on, like I said, the gender neutrality bathroom, people's going to get up there and say, "Oh, the minute I see a man dressed up as a woman, I'm going to, beat their face in." Why? Just because you can't use the same bathroom. I mean, that's kind of the mentality of people. So I'm going to say on safety.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that if you reduce that argument to absurdity, you probably see a point at which safety becomes very cumbersome. Like,
yeah.
Imagine, just scrap the whole COVID idea, but hypothetically the government could legislate that we all wear masks all the time for influenza.
Yes.
How do we know when freedom needs to take precedence over safety? Is there a mechanism by which we can determine when we ought to favor freedom over safety?
Yes, there is. For one, I think when you're on your own property, that's where your freedoms are. I mean, don't wear your mask. I mean, I think that's where it all comes down to. Is like when you're on your own property, you can do whatever you want, so long as it's within reason. I mean, I look at the mask situation as one's own choice. I mean, I wore it when during the times when COVID was going on, but at the time, I mean, but I was also was laxed by it. It's no different than the speed limit says 55 miles an hour and you're going, 60. I think so long as you're on your own property, you can do whatever you want, so long as it is a legal, as long as it's a legal stance. So, but when you go out, once you go out and you want to go to, you're on a public street or you're in another business, then that is where you have to go and respect what the authority of the government has.
Well, we're on to our final questions here. What would you say is the best formula for contentment?
I'm gonna have to say maybe just I don't know if this is the right word, but maybe this is kind of where I'm going. Maybe compassion. I mean, I think that there needs to be more of that. I mean, have compassion for other people and their views. I think once people become more compassionate of other people, then that is kind of where I think that's where you kind of gradually start changing your communities, start changing your counties, your state, and the community and the world. So I would say showing compassion. I mean, whether it's, you have a friend or a neighbor that does not agree with you on some things, ultimately you can go to every single person and you can find something you disagree with them on, but I guarantee you can go to every person and find something that you can agree with them on. And I think that you need to build on that part of what you can agree on to show that compassion. I think that's where you can make the gradual changes.
Yeah. Compassion doesn't seem to be just for the other person's benefit either.
No.
It makes us happy too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we're so busy focusing on the things which which are distinctions from one person to another, and yet, like you said, we kind of develop compassion or empathy by looking at the commonalities, seeing the things that we agree with them on, and then we start to see ourselves in those other people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think a great answer.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks. I'm on my game, I guess.
What is the best thing that we can do to better ourselves?
That I'm going to have to probably say respect ourselves. I think, people know when they are doing wrong. When you put your hand up on that hot plate, you're going to get burned. I think once you start respecting yourselves, then that is where you can go and start showing your compassion. And I think, and respect is something, it's taught, but also I think it's also something that is, it's in our it's in our human nature. I mean, everybody knows that you should never go and murder somebody, regardless. Everybody knows that. But I think that once you go and start respecting yourself and respecting other people, then that helps shows. Like, it goes back to the compassion of trying to change the world. So I think respecting ourselves, each person is probably the best thing.
If you imagine this podcast would reach every person in the world, what one thing would you like to convey to everybody?
Oh, geez. Yeah, probably I would have to say volunteer and get involved in your community, no matter the size, no matter the involved, whether it is picking up trash along the side of the road, whether it is helping your neighbor clean their gutters, or attending a city council meeting and saying, hey, how can I get involved? Reach out to your mayors or your city councilmen. I would have to say get involved in your community, because that is where change happens. When you go and you get involved in your community and you start improving it, then that starts showing it actually creates volumes, because people then will start seeing it's like, oh, hey, they're cleaning up this house, or hey, they're doing this project. That word of mouth gets out. So I say get involved in your community and always vote. That is one of the things I always stress. I don't care who you vote for, just go and vote.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time working up the ideas of the way that we think that the world ought to play out, and very practical advice to actually get out there and do something about it at the individual community level.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any
I agree.
thoughts? Those are actually all of my questions. Is there anything that you would like to say here at the end?
No, I really appreciate getting to meet you guys and knowing more about you and what you're doing and walking across America and everything. And I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad that we were able to host you when you was here in Assumption. So I truly appreciate it, and I'm definitely look forward to following your journey.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, we had guys, and thanks for joining us on the podcast. It's been great. You seem like a great mayor for the town, and I think we haven't talked about it privately, but I would imagine I can speak for both of us and say I just appreciate the angle that you come at it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm 43 years old. It's what I've been grained into me, is what I've been taught, and I like to pass it along. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very balanced and about the
people.
Yes.
Yeah, about the people, not about the politics.
You're exactly right.
And for a nice little town too.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Derek. Appreciate you joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, you can donate through one of the links on our website, walkingamericacouple.com. Or, as always, find us on the road. Thanks, America.